a panel on San Diego technology, software engineering, and learning more about the just how to break into tech in San Diego. And we have with us a great a great group of panelists. And so I wanted to quickly just introduce the folks we have. You can see their pictures on the slide or in live format right above the slide. So we have maybe maybe as I call your name out, feel free to wave or say hello if you so desire. So let's start with Randy Camp. Randy Camp is a senior software engineering manager with Teradata. Hello, Randy. Next, we have Amy Schools, who is a backend Python developer at ISS Governance. Next, we have Carney Chang, who is the Vice President of Engineering at Measurable. And then finally, we have Alexis Perumal, who is the Associate Director of Global Cloud Operations at Illumina. So welcome to all four of our awesome panelists. So many years of experience between the four of you, and so it's great to have you join. And so to start, well, actually, I also wanted to point out for the attendees, there is a Q&A screen. There's a Q&A panel. So at the bottom of your Zoom panel, you'll see an icon that has the word Q or the letters Q&A on it. And so if you click on that, you can actually ask us questions there, and we'll be monitoring the questions. Myself and Sam, as co-hosts, will be monitoring the questions, and then hopefully we can get those covered for you. So I have a few questions. I will start with a quick introduction of myself, and then also would love to hear just a introduction and just I would say a couple minutes about the origin story from each of the panelists who we have here. So let me just start with myself. I'm Nimit Maru. I'm your host today. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Full Stack Academy. I have done programming and web development since my older brother introduced me to it when I was in middle school, which was lucky for me because I didn't have I wasn't very good at sports or really anything else. So it was very it was nice that I found something that I was good at. Fast forward, I continued web development and programming through high school, and then majored in computer science in college. That's where I met my co-founder at Full Stack, David Yang. Later, both of us worked at Yahoo together, like Randy. In fact, Randy doesn't know this, but I'm pretty sure I interviewed with Randy at Yahoo Music a while, very early in my career while he was there. But I ended up taking the offer with Yahoo Travel in Sunnyvale. And so so both David and I worked in Sunnyvale for 3 years. And then we left, and then we kind of started our own companies. Prior to Full Stack, I had started a company called BloomSpot in the kind of the Groupon space. That's a whole story on its own. And then in 2012, went through Y Combinator, and here we are. So that's a little bit of background about myself. Hopefully, that'll be the last that I talk about me, and we'll try to focus on the panelists. So maybe I'll just go in the order that I introduced the attendees. We'll start with Randy. Randy, it would be great to hear just a couple minutes about your kind of origin story, what got you to fall in love with tech, and then find yourself in San Diego.
Sure. Well, I can start with the finding myself in San Diego. I was born and raised here, so I have that going for me. One of the it's becoming more and more common, but used to be one of the few. I got started with software development really, I guess, in high school. Had a science teacher that bought an Apple IIe and brought that in, and a few of us started playing around with it, and I, had a great time. So um, convinced my dad to get one for home, and just continued from there, and that led me to studying computer science at San Diego State, um, and out of college got my start at HP, and was at HP for a number of years here in San Diego as well as in Barcelona, Spain. Uh, Another connection here, I worked with Alexis when I was at HP. Um, so,
I like that.
yeah.
Nice.
um, from there, a few friends started a company called Music Match, and we were very early in the digital music revolution. Um, had software for essentially converting CDs into MP3s well before streaming music was the norm. But then we added streaming and various other features, and ultimately got acquired by Yahoo. And so that brought me to Yahoo, where I was part of Yahoo Music, and then Yahoo Mail and Yahoo Messenger for a while. Here in San Diego, we had a small office that remained throughout our time with Yahoo. And then after that, took a little bit of time off, and decided after a year or so of that it was time to do something new. So I went to Teradata, where I had a few friends from HP, and have been there now for a little over 3.5 years.
All right. Um, yeah, I remember coming to San Diego to interview with your team, and I remember being in this like room where it was a really big group interview. Do you remember doing that? I remember I was on the board solving problems.
Was there a
Um,
fireplace in the room? Was it that room?
maybe I don't remember
Yeah.
the fireplace, but I remember it was a very hot day. And anyway, I mean, eventually somebody told me, okay, like work in the headquarters, So I ended up wanting to go to Sunnyvale, but yeah, that's really cool. I'm sure we met that day.
Yeah.
Um, so cool. So next would love to hear from Amy Schools.
Hello. So I'm definitely newer to coding in the tech industry than most of the other people. I've been working professionally for about 4 years almost. I never did any coding or anything growing up. I always was like very focused on reading and writing and that type of stuff, and kind of avoided math and science and computers as much as possible. But then after college, I graduated with like a social science degree. I was kind of like trying to figure out where to take that. And I saw on Facebook that someone I knew had gone to a coding boot camp, and was very intrigued by that. I didn't know that people could just learn how to code. So I started trying out and like playing around online with free classes, and I liked it. So I moved down here to San Diego in summer 2016 to go to a coding boot camp, and that went well. So then I started working. I stayed in San Diego and I started working after that, and now I'm, I guess, like a mid-level ish developer.
Okay, cool. Which boot camp did you go to in San Diego?
It's called Learn Academy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Um, so I think that it is always interesting that how there are a lot of parallel fields that actually groom you well for tech and programming that maybe don't seem like it. And
Mhm.
I always thought music was one of them. I know that we've had so many students at Full Stack who were music majors or had some kind of affiliation to music, and then they've become, you know, really good engineers. And somehow it's like, I don't know how that works. Maybe it comes full circle, or maybe all of our assumptions are wrong, and we should just. So anyway, thanks for your background, Amy. We'd love to hear from Carney.
Yeah. So Kearney Chang, VP of Engineering at Measurable. We're a startup in downtown San Diego. Just had our Series B in 2019. You know, but I started in technology kind of as a kid when my dad brought home our first computer and you know, tore that thing apart and started building basic scripts so that I can play my video games. And eventually I went to UCSD, and that's how I came to San Diego. Went to school there. You know, and I've been in tech ever since. You know, I started doing machine learning over at what was WebSense. We did real-time text classification, so that was definitely very interesting for me. And I thought I wanted to do more research and development, so I went back to school to San Diego State and got a master's in computational science, where we did a lot of oceanography modeling on high performance computing clusters. And so I did my master's there, and eventually thought I wanted to go to law school. And fortunately, last minute, I saved myself from that and joined a startup in San Diego called Brightscope, which is now actually ISS. You know, so I spent a couple of years there and realized that I really liked the startup scene. And I think it's been now my third or fourth seed level startup when I start, and I've usually kind of exited after a kind of a Series A or Series B. But this is my third year at Measurable, and we're going strong, and I love it here. And you know, it's been fun.
Great. Nice. So thanks for that, Carney. Love to hear some more from Alexis.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me. It's really interesting. As I listen to your stories, I see parallels. Obviously, Randy described that, and Randy, it was fun to hear that you started with an Apple IIe. When I was in 7th grade, I got a chance to take a computer course, and this was in the early days. We had Commodore PETs, and I think little cassette tapes, but I remember I was mesmerized by it. And then I actually moved and went to a different school in 8th grade, and that school wasn't quite as far advanced, but there were a couple teachers that wanted to get the school into computers, and they considered me an expert because I had been to the prior school and had actually taken a class. And so at that school, they actually figured out how to buy an Apple IIe, and then it wasn't even a class; it was just getting students together and just kind of playing with it, and that really got my interest going. And honestly, I didn't actually do much with computers and technology in high school, but when it was time to apply to college, I thought, you know, computers are the future, and that's what I want to go after. So I went ahead and put information and computer science on my application to UC Irvine, and ended up going to school there and studying that, and I just loved it. And I loved the way it just taught you how to think. And came out of UCI and went to work at HP in Rancho Bernardo in digital imaging and inkjet printing, and that's when I worked with Randy, which was a real fun time. Did a lot of work in image processing, but after a few years, I ended up moving into management roles, and then as the years went by, I continued in technology and development, but not doing coding myself, and just kind of moved away from that. And then actually a few years ago, I actually decided to go back to business school. And this is a strange thing that happened, but when I was in business school, there was a class we had in macroeconomics where we were there was like a team competition where there was a simulation modeling a national economy with fiscal policy and monetary policy and all that stuff. And we were supposed to put our team together, and then it was like, you know, one of those simulation rounds where you put in your numbers, things happen, and they're different teams, you get results, and you would have a certain number of rounds over a certain number of weeks, and then the winner gets, you know, a blueberry muffin or something. And so I really wanted to win this, so I kind of put together a dream team of friends in the class, and the professor had a paper about how the economy worked, and he had all these equations in it. And before our team meeting, I got all those equations, and I built this very complex Excel spreadsheet that had all that stuff in there. And I thought, okay, by having this in here, we can model this perfectly, and we can win this competition. And so I went to my first team meeting, and I had my spreadsheet, and I was really excited about it. And I showed it to my team members, and they kind of said, "Oh, okay, that's funny." And then the next guy said, "Well, I modeled it in Java." And then the next guy said, "Oh, well, I modeled it in C++." And then somebody else did in Java. And so I kind of felt a little feeble having my little Excel spreadsheet when other people had implemented it in code. And I thought, you know, I used to write code back in the old days. Why don't I do that? And so I actually thought, you know, I ought to get back to my roots. And so I actually, of all people, talked to my daughter, who by that point was studying computer science in college herself. And she said, "Dad, you may want to consider learning Python." And back in the old days, I had done C and a little bit of C++. She says, "You may want to learn Python." And my youngest son was in junior high at the time. So I thought, well, maybe I can learn Python with him. So I got the book, Automate the Boring Stuff with Python, started learning it, started really getting into it. And then also through my school program, got a lot more into data analytics, started working with Tableau, and really decided that, you know, this is fun. This is really fun stuff. And I really want to focus on that and, and really go deep on it. And so since then, that's what I've been doing. I'm actually finishing up a data science bootcamp now, where I'm able to sharpen my skills even further, and just really having a lot of fun playing with data, doing all kinds of visualizations and modeling. And honestly, you know, I'm a little bit, you know, later in my career, but I see this as the kind of thing that, you know, as I look out over the next 10, 20, 30 years, I'm not going to want to continue to build PowerPoint and go to meetings and all that kind of stuff. But the opportunity to work with data, to visualize data, to build models, to build predictive models, even now, even on my screen, you know, I'm looking at COVID data and building dashboarding around that, to me is really fun. And as we see the world changing, as the world is becoming much more data driven, I think it's an opportunity for all of us to build our technical skills, combining both programming, web development, cloud, as well as data and data science, and putting it all together. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Nice, thank you. It's a fascinating story. I think an interesting connection is that we actually started full stack at Wharton.
Oh, wow.
Because I was also an MBA student there in 2010 to 2012, and in Philadelphia. And really, what I started noticing is like how much programming can actually help in business, right? And secondly, that the tools have become so much more accessible than they used to be. Like I remember, you know, like we always have this idea of the hello world. Like hello world was actually pretty hard at one point because you had to get so many things set up to make sure that something was compiling and you were getting output, right? And now like the tools are so easy, like Python, JavaScript, all this stuff, like you can immediately start being productive. And so so I think that's what gave us the insight that like the time is right to finally let's teach the business students how to code. And I think that it's so I mean I guess it was effective after that, but that's really cool to hear your story. And so I think I wanted to start with what you, Alexis, you just kind of talked about, which was COVID-19. And you know, we are all in different companies, and I think I've talked to so many CEOs and founders over the last couple of weeks, just to see how everybody is dealing with what's going on, and there's so much changing. And so in your companies, and especially your engineering teams, how is it impacting your work? I'm guessing everybody has gone remote. So I think that's one thing that engineers can do more easily than others, right? But then how is it impacting your growth plans? How is it impacting your hiring in the immediate future? Let's say 6 months, 12 months, 24 months. Like, has there been that kind of planning that you've had purview to?
Well, I can talk a little bit about how it's impacting. Obviously, one of the benefits of doing software development is you can pretty much do that anywhere. And now we have pretty good collaboration tools, so things are able to continue. Our teams practice Scrum, and so we still hold our stand-ups and all the ceremonies. But at the same time, it is a group of people that are used to seeing each other every day. And so it's getting a little old being isolated. But for the most part, things are still, moving along. As far as how it's impacted hiring, we're obviously having to do hiring only online, calls and video and whatnot. It hasn't changed anything in the near term. I've been doing actually some interviewing this week with some candidates, and we haven't really done planning out beyond the immediate needs because it's hard to say exactly how things are going to evolve and shift. So it's looking a little bit more at the near term right now.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, we're in a very similar boat where we've only addressed the short term. Our C-suite has, our finance team has gone into creating a couple models around loss of revenue for the next 5 months, to churn of clients over the next year and a half. So we're definitely preparing for the worst. We do believe that the sustainability industry as a whole will be even more important now. And so we think that there won't be a huge impact, though our clients, being big banks and asset managers, are definitely waiting, and even we are waiting to see what's going to happen economically. So we have taken some short-term precautions to make sure that we have liquidity at hand, and we basically cut discretionary spending for the next quarter or so. We've audited all of our services to make sure that we're not spending extra money on AWS that's not necessary, and we've actually froze hiring until we can figure out what's going to happen.
Yep. That is very similar to what I've been hearing, which is that there's a just a short-term freeze on any non-essential spending while we figure out what's going on. But a lot of folks have been telling me that their 12-month plans haven't changed that much, because I think that this is in some ways a external event. I think it's definitely going to have a big problem in certain industries. And so a little bit also depends on who your clients are, your company's clients are, and like how they're going to be impacted, which will probably determine what's happening in your company. So, okay, so that's interesting, and I'm sure, I think Randy mentioned this, is that we're all it's been weeks now, right? Probably the first week, everybody working from home was fun. It's like, okay, we all get to be at home now, and then I think it's like I miss even the grocery store now, and so never thought that Trader Joe's would attract me so much, but so well, attract me so much that I'm like ready to risk my life just to go there. So okay, so I think that's interesting. So speaking of this, I think that we've seen a Yeah, actually, you know what? We have a few questions from the attendees. Why don't we get to a couple of those? So first one is from Giamapolo Gemelli, who's asking, what are the key personality traits that are exhibited by top coders? And I think, you know, I would say top coders, but I would also love to hear your view on entry level coders. Like, how do you make the decision on, you know, what are you looking for when you're hiring a programmer?
I haven't done too much hiring, but I've just been like a member of a few like group interviews. But I think that one thing that's really important for entry level is like the desire to learn like that you really like learning, and you're more interested than the learning aspect than the like end outcome, I guess, the process of learning. Um, so yeah, and like I would say communication are both important. Both of those are kind of soft skills, I guess, but I think they're pretty important.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. I think, you know, obviously in the interview process, you've got to demonstrate that you've got the technical skills, but often what sets people apart is that they're able to communicate and get that expressed well and go beyond just the technical skills and show that they can kind of understand the big picture and how everything comes together. Because most everything these days, right, requires a team of people. You're very rarely working alone anymore in software development. That was the way it was long ago, but now you're going to be a part of a team, and you need to be able to participate and be effective at communication.
Muted. Are there any, you know, if you ask the converse of this question, like, are there any trends that you find that make you not want to hire someone? You know, and or I mean, obviously there will be some things that you know you definitely wouldn't hire someone, but like, what is something that you find once in a while that sticks out as a red flag um, to you?
I've gotten several people where, you know, we usually do a programming challenge with the candidate, and it's usually a collaborative process where the interviewer is working with the interviewee, and sometimes I'll even give them a problem that we saw that day, either in our production environment or something that we're trying to solve, so that both interviewee and interviewer are working at it together. And sometimes I will tell the candidate, like, oh, I think that's wrong. You know, can you guys look at it again? And some people don't accept the fact that it may be wrong and won't look at it from a different perspective or a different angle. And that is a big red flag to me for someone that's like stuck in their ways and won't rethink an issue.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was going to say kind of a similar thing, but when we do problem solving interviews like that, um, it can be a red flag if the person doesn't engage and ask for. Often it's vague and on purpose, and if the person just tries to go straight ahead down a path without asking any kind of clarifying questions or getting more information. And then, you know, getting frustrated without communicating, but it's obvious that they're getting frustrated. That can be a red flag that they're, you know, going to pound their head against the wall rather than actually talking to the person that's sitting there in the room with them.
Yeah. Sometimes I think that especially on the entry level side, entry level developer side, I find so I find two ends. Sometimes there's like underconfidence, or like, you know, a strong kind of fear of answering a difficult question and really just trying to know what they're talking about. And then a lot of times it's the other side where it's like overconfidence and not realizing that, that this problem is more complicated than it sounds like, or there's a lot more depth than appears. And I think both of them, and how someone deals with that can be red flags. I think both of you guys pointed that out. So another interesting question from Berta is, is Python, I guess this is kind of specific, maybe I'll ask this to Amy since she's a Python programmer, but is Python a language that will exist in the future? I think that's a pretty, I mean, I think so. I mean, I think,
Yeah, I guess it depends on your timeline. Definitely the
well,
next 5 years. It's still
yeah.
growing.
Well, I mean, we just had the,
did you hear the hot language now is COBOL?
yeah,
Because
that's right.
the state's unemployment systems are overrun and they're looking for COBOL programmers. And I think
That's right. Yeah.
I think what that illustrates is languages may be created, but they never die.
Yeah.
And I think the reality is we need to be multilingual.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Amy,
I hope
on
Python is still going to be around in the future. It's been around for a while. I'm not sure how long, maybe 30 years or so. If anyone else knows, they can correct me. But so I would say there's a pretty good chance it will be one of the more longer lasting languages compared to other ones that are much newer than that.
Yeah. I agree. I would tell Berta that if you are, like I would say early in your career, sometimes it is helpful to latch your horse to a language that is going to be around, and especially one that is growing and commonplace. Probably COBOL is probably not that, although maybe in New Jersey, COBOL is needed now and you'll get a job there. But Python is definitely a good, I don't know which way the saying goes. Like, it's a good wagon to latch your horse onto, or it's a good horse to latch your wagon onto. One of those two. But I think Python is a pretty good bet, just like JavaScript or Ruby or PHP or Java. Like all of these, I think or .NET, C#. I mean, all of these are quite popular. And to be honest, if you're really good at any of them, you'll probably be great. You'll be doing well. So
yeah, I would, I'd say more important than the language is really understanding the fundamentals of software development, because all languages do the same thing. The syntax may be different and the keywords are different, but if you understand the fundamentals of software engineering, then you can easily adapt. But picking a language like Python that's very popular and becoming an expert at that is a great place to start.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that since Python is a strong language in the data science world too, if that's an interest, I think Python's definitely a strong language to do if that is interesting to you.
Yeah, I like Python because it's used for like so many different things that you're not really stuck in one like area of coding or one industry, or you can go more into data science or data visualization or tons of different things. But I like working in Python. Yeah.
And that's not true of COBOL.
So we had we started the Grace Hopper Academy, which was our programming school for women, and it just turns out that the namesake of that academy, Grace Hopper, is the inventor of COBOL. And so a few years ago on April Fool's Day, we had changed our whole website to say we're changing to being a COBOL boot camp. And so I was joking with my co-founder. I'm like, maybe we should whip out that copy, now that New Jersey really wants a COBOL boot camp. Like we're the only boot camp that's actually ready to go.
Well, there's another connection. My oldest son is at Yale, or would be, but he's now here in San Diego in Grace Hopper College.
Oh, nice. That's right. Yeah. That's right. Cool. So, okay, great. So, one thing I just want to say to the attendees is that if you have a question, it would be best if you submit it in the Q&A panel instead of in the chat, just so I can keep track of it, because there's a lot of text flying in the text in the chat, and so hard for me to know exactly. But I do see we have some full staffers who are answering some questions as well. So okay, so let me go back to one of my questions. I think how a question that we get often is like, hey, I'm considering doing a master's in computer science, or I'm considering coming to this boot camp, or I'm considering, just self-teaching and like, through kind of YouTube education, like YouTube University, right? Basically. And so like, what do I do? I think each of them have very different, like YouTube University prices, the cost of an internet connection. Full stack, like, so we cost it in the thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars. Then university maybe $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. And so like each of them have kind of different levels. And so I know some of you have a formal computer science degree. In your day-to-day, like, how do you see that that computer science degree coming into play? I think one is in your work, and second is just in the stamp that it provides, the signal it provides on your resume, right? So both ways I think create some value. Any thoughts? Should we just, is this the end of formal CS education?
I can reply or go ahead.
Go ahead, Alexis, go ahead.
Well, I've done a lot of these different forms of education, everything from a $10 Udemy course
That's right.
to $200K at Wharton. And I've done all of the above, and I've loved all of the above. So if you're in a situation where you can only afford a $10 class, I've done some excellent $10 classes. They all have their pros and cons, and I think I would say just put the mix together as you see fit. I think the important thing is to do something you're interested in, do something you're passionate about, be open-minded and run with it. The earlier question about what do you look for? One of the things I look for is somebody who has a passion for what they're doing. One test for me is if I'm going to go do, whether it's a course or some kind of training or something, and I sometimes will ask myself, if I got nothing out of this monetarily, if it did not pay back, like many people would ask me, do you really think that Wharton degree is going to pay off? At some level, if I can honestly say, I don't care, because I'm interested in this, I'm excited about it, I want to do it, and then like a monetary or financial payback is just icing on the cake, and if it doesn't happen, that's okay. That is, I think for me, an important indicator that I'm in the right place. And I think all those different forms they all have their strengths and weaknesses. They all have their benefits. I think you can mix and match in a good way. And I think the important thing is to go and do it and follow your heart, follow your interests, and dive into it and go the extra mile.
Awesome. I like that. That like the education is more in the beholder than the cost, in a sense. Like you can learn a lot on, and so no matter which kind of venue you're choosing, your effort and your attitude and your like passion for that really is what changes your outcome out of that. And I see that, even as a teacher, I can see that a teacher can do a lot to inspire somebody, but a teacher can at the end of the day do only so much, in terms of getting somebody really excited about it. One thing I noticed what's surprising is that we've had a number of university professors teach at Full Stack, and they always say that something that surprises them about boot camps, which is very different than university, is that everybody at a boot camp is there because they want to be there, right? And like they've personally chosen to take this on. Whereas in university, they found that, there are some people who want to be there, whereas some people are trying to fulfill a credit, some people are, planning like their spring break, like some people have so it's like a very mixed pool of intentions, and that really changes the energy in the class quite a bit. But that's really interesting. So I wanted to, by the way, Alexis has to drop out just for a couple minutes. He's going to be back in a bit. And so I wanted to, let's see if we can take another question from the community. So, okay, so this is a good one. So this is from Sarah Silstrup. And her question is, what would you tell a graduating senior in high school where to start in this field? Basically, like, and it's worded as, what would you tell a graduating senior facing this world? What to start, where to start? And I think when facing the world, I think she's referring to kind of the, I guess the somewhat economic meltdown / virus situation, or maybe just the broader, the broader unfairness of the world. So I'm not sure how. Yeah.
Well, one thing, and I think Amy kind of touched on this a little bit, is to look at what things are you really interested in, because almost every field, maybe not, well, even garbage collection, I bet they do, but almost every field is going to have software today doing something, right? And so you can apply your interest in doing software development to your other interests and bring those two things together, because that's going to help you to kind of hone where you want to go and what you want to do. And and maybe it's more for a high school junior who's, applying to colleges and going through the interview process as they become, kind of midway through their senior year. Because I think seniors at this point, it's, they've already gone through the interview process. But if you can tie those two things together, it'll really help in the college interview process, where you can show how you want to apply your education to solving, real world problems. And whether it's in the sciences or it's in communication, being able to do Zoom is a great application of software, or it's maybe you want to help companies like Zoom so they don't have all the security and privacy issues, and you want to get more into that side of it. But being able to bring it all together, I think, is an important thing, so that you're not just thinking, I'm getting a degree, but how are you going to use that degree and apply it?
Anybody else?
I would say, like, it's definitely a good field to be going into. It's hard to predict like where the tech industry is going, or what it's going to look like in 5 years when you're applying for jobs. But even if it looks a lot different, it's still going to be around in some form. And maybe, you don't end up doing a job that's strictly coding or something like that, but they're learning to code is not going to like hinder you in any way. It can really only help you with other skills. Like that sort of logic and problem solving is something that you could use in a lot of different jobs. And, maybe you work at a tech company and figure out that you want to do project management or something. It's all very interconnected. So even if you kind of end up finding a slightly different path, or the tech industry looks different in 5 years, it's still a pretty good place to be, I think.
Yeah.
Cool, good answer. And I think on that, Amy, I would love to, you've had a recent experience in going through the post boot camp and job search journey. Could you talk a little bit about going from, I think you had mentioned that you went to coding, you studied one programming language in your boot camp, you're working in another language, and and then just more about your journey of getting your first job, and how was that experience?
Yeah. So the boot camp that I went to at the time was a Ruby boot camp. And Ruby is like a really good language for beginners. So it was a pretty good language to learn in a really short amount of time. But the bootcamp was only 4 months. So they did some JavaScript, some Ruby, like a variety of like GitHubs, like different things. So we didn't really get like super deep into the fundamentals of a programming language. So by the time I was applying for jobs, I was kind of open to anything. And I got this Python job. And since I wasn't like super deep into it, I could switch pretty easily, I think. Like if you know the fundamentals really well, it's easy to switch. But if you're also don't know them too well, it's not too hard to transfer over. And Python and Ruby are like sort of similar. So it wasn't like a crazy jump to make. But at this point, if I had to switch back to Ruby, it might be a little bit hard because, you just get so used to like certain things. But yeah, it's not like, it's kind of like French and Italian or Spanish, Portuguese, something like that, or they're kind of related,
That's
but
fair.
not exactly the same. And then, what was the second part of your question?
Just tell us a little more about your journey, your job search journey after coding bootcamp, and like some tips that you would have for people who are entering this process.
Definitely networking is very important. That's how I got my first job, and my second job as well was at meetups. I went to a ton of meetups, and I'm like an introvert, so it's kind of hard at first to just walk up to people and introduce yourself. But once you kind of get used to it, it's not, it's definitely doable. And interviewing is really hard. I think that's my least favorite part of working in the tech industry, is having to do technical interviews. Neither of the jobs that I've gotten like had super intense ones. I've never applied somewhere like Google where it's like, a crazy high standard, but I would say practice technical interviews like as much as possible. There's tons of books and online stuff, and you can't really practice too much for that kind of thing because there's so much to learn. And then, so the boot camp I went to also had an internship as part of it was like 3 months of classes and a 1 month internship. And that was really helpful too, because you get a lot of like the experience on the job, like GitHub and that type of stuff, that once you're in a professional setting, it's totally different. And then when I was applying, I was not having too much luck. So I started asking about internships, and I started asking about apprenticeships. And that's how I actually got my first job. Is they said like, we can't take on like a whole nother engineer right now. And I was like, okay, what if I did some kind of like apprenticeship thing where it was kind of halfway? And so they were open to that. So I started out like part-time and got paid like a smaller salary, and then it turned into a full-time job. So I think be open to compromises and stuff. A lot of my boot camp, other people in my boot camp, it was pretty challenging. I think it's definitely not like something that's just gonna fall in your lap. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's good to hear directly from somebody who's gone through it. And so I think we have a follow-up question from someone in our audience, Nora Phillips, who's asking about would a coding bootcamp be the best path for someone interested in potentially freelancing or creating websites for small businesses, given that there are a lot of templates available now for different platforms? I don't know if you guys would have any views on that. Otherwise, I could add some thoughts. Okay, maybe I'll take that. Which is, I think that it is. I think there are kind of two questions here. One is that there are now a lot of templates available for WordPress and other platforms that make it very easy to put up like a simple landing page and just like a standard shopping cart or something like that. And so whereas probably 15 years ago, just the ability to kind of build that basic framework was very valuable and it was very useful. Nowadays, because of the appearance of these like $20, $30 templates, that kind of skill has just the need of it has become more about learning how to customize a template. And so I would say if you want to do that, I would get really behind a certain platform such as Squarespace and say, you know what, I'm going to become a Squarespace developer or a WordPress developer and be really, really good at that ecosystem, because you see all these ecosystems they're actually very deep. They have plugins, they have all different kinds of features that you can build on them. And so I would say I would focus on a platform and then learn how to be the template maker rather than the template user. And then I think you'll be very much in demand. And I think a coding bootcamp is not a specific path for that or for anything really. A coding bootcamp, is a way for you to get a curated path to learning a certain stack really well, right? It's like a curated immersive path where you focus on one stack for 3 to 4 months or 6 months, whatever your bootcamp length is. And it gives you an incredible head start. I would say I'm sure all of you who've learned kind of more the meandering path kind of on your own when you were younger, like it just takes a very long time to build up those skills if someone is not showing you what to do and also giving you that commitment device to do it every day and get better at it quickly. So I know, like for me, like our students graduate at the level that it probably took me 5 years to get to. Just probably half the time playing Duke Nukem 3D and the other half of the time actually working. And so like like the meandering path can be very it can take a really long time. So I think coding boot camps help with that. So okay, so that's that question. For our panelists, I have a question around just remote work, right? I think that a lot of people who are looking for work these days, if they're not already in a large city like a San Diego or a LA or San Francisco or New York, if they're not in one of these cities, and actually nowadays, like the costs are also increasing so much in these cities that there is a desire for people to move to other areas and still continue to have this work. And maybe one of the silver linings to this madness that's going on outside is that companies are being forced to learn how to embrace remote work. Do you see that happening at your companies at all? Do you hear anything yet from your HR that they're more open to hiring remote developers than they were before?
So
I can answer that.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so from our Measurables perspective, we do have remote employees. We have remote employees in Europe, and we have remote employees in the East Coast. Our engineering team is all based out of San Diego, though we do have a remote work policy. I think as Randy mentioned earlier, tools like Zoom and Slack really make it easy to be remote and to see that, to have that face-to-face connection. It's like you're working in the office. I think for us personally, the response to COVID and work remote for us is not a start of a new trend, though I could see more of our people working remote on a part-time basis, right? It's just a convenience that we have, and I think it's really good to attract people, but at the same time, I know Measurable wants to have a culture that's in the office, and we really like people, or we like the team that we work with. So we like to see people.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much this impacts for the long haul. Over many, many years, I've seen, the trends, come and go. And actually, Music Match, when we started, we were a virtual company. Everybody was remote, and that worked really well. And eventually we got an office in San Diego and formed that. And still had some people remote and some people in the office. And over time, after we got acquired by Yahoo, Yahoo had lots of satellite offices and remote workers from home and things like that. But over time, started to really focus on centralizing in the Bay Area. And so started doing away with a lot of the remote work. And I don't know now what their plans are there, but at Teradata, it's kind of interesting. There has been a move to having a lot of in-office development at multiple locations. But Teradata, being such a large company, has offices all around, but then we also work closely with our biggest customers. And so then we have remote workers in cities wherever those customers are. So we have, I believe, almost half of the workforce is remote. So it's a pretty large number, and so the company's kind of used to working that way. But I think it's really kind of company by company. Some companies really want in office, and others are supportive of remote. I do find that if you have a team where most everybody's in the office and one person's remote, that person's kind of at a disadvantage. If most people are at remote, or even just a large chunk are, so that the communication norm of the team becomes online instead of walking over to somebody's desk, then it works well. But if you've got one person that's kind of a remote island, they have to work pretty hard to fit in with the team.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We've observed that ourselves too. What about you, Amy? What's going on at your company?
We had a flexible work from home policy before, so we could work from home once a week. And then a lot of people worked from home in afternoons, or like personally, I would try to avoid traffic. So it wasn't like a huge transition. And one member of my team is remote, so we were kind of used to doing everything over Slack and Zoom already. But yeah, it seems like it's per company. Like when I used to work for a company that was smaller, we got acquired. The company that acquired us does not like loads any sort of remote stuff. So they were like really corporate about it. You have to be in your desk, that sort of thing. But I like working remote. I would like to work for like a fully remote company at some point. Like there's some pretty big ones like Zapier or Envision. Those are both two of the really big ones that are fully distributed. And it seems like if a company has a good handle on it and kind of has their system figured out already, it can work really well. But obviously in this crisis, it's different. Everyone's kind of scrambling. But
Yeah,
tech companies, it's not as hard as other industries.
yeah, I think that makes sense. Like right now, there's also a added, we find that in our company that parents who had younger children are, at a disadvantage right now, just because daycare has been disrupted in a big way. And so I think it's created work from home, but probably like double work from home for, people who have that situation. So I think, hopefully in a normal work from home situation, that added stress wouldn't be there. So so I have a question around training in your companies. Like how do you how do you personally actually keep up your skills, right? Like I think that even just a couple of years, I remember when I was at business school for 2 years, just 2 years, right? I wasn't coding regularly. I came out and suddenly I was like, wow, so much has changed. So much new stuff is out. And I feel like I'm behind all these new version updates and all kinds of stuff. And so things are changing so quickly. What kind of habits have you built into your own life to help you stay up to date, to have a long career in this field?
I'm probably a bad example because I haven't written software in a number of years since I've been in management for a couple decades now. I've gone kind of back and forth. Obviously, at a startup, everybody has to do everything. So there, I went back into doing software development for a while. But I think it's critical to keep doing something that is going to be of interest and useful. If you just learn something and don't apply it, it quickly fades, right? So oftentimes in software careers, you hear about some tool that's really going to make life better. You learn enough about it to maybe do a proof of concept and show how it's going to improve things for the business or for the team or whatever, and then you can start incorporating that in and making use of it. I would recommend against trying to preserve the status quo of your current project for as many decades as possible. That would be a bad approach.
Right. Yeah, I think that does happen if you move into management or like a project, like a product role or something. It's and I think that speaks more to the thing where if you want to maintain your development skills, it has to be like an intentional practice that you have to build in. What about you, Carney? Have you like what kind of practices have you developed?
Yeah, I still really enjoy programming when I can. It definitely isn't as much as I'd like. Most recently, what I've been doing is taking part in some mob programming sessions that we have at the office. And so that's a good way for me to disseminate knowledge that was in our code base and kind of get in there and help refactor things and update the paradigm of how things are developed at the office. Personally, I do a lot of reading around architectures and what other people are doing, and talking to people in my network to see what they're up to, the challenges that they're having at work. So definitely not as hands-on development as much as I'd like, but definitely trying to keep up with what's going on from a high-level perspective. I have two young kids at home, and so I've been trying to learn GraphQL for a little while, and it's been fun, but definitely challenging. And so I do try to have some of those projects in mind, though sometimes it becomes a little overwhelming because there are so many cool things out there. Right? I mean, I said I've wanted to learn Go for quite some time, and React Native and all of that. And I'm just trying to focus on one thing at a time.
Yeah, there's just so much stuff coming out at once. I'm sure, Amy, if you're following it's like even as a daily programmer, there's an overwhelming amount of new stuff. Every day on Hacker News, you could learn like 3 more libraries.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's pretty hard to keep track of all the new things. I feel like at my job, I get plenty of programming. Like the team I'm on is kind of like research, does more research and kind of internal tools. So we get to try out a lot of like more new stuff than like enterprise software teams, which is kind of fun. And I feel like that's pretty good. I get to like, always find a new, fun thing to research and write a tech proposal. And I like that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I in my own career, I've noticed that that you have to almost schedule in some time to code and to have a defined project that you're making, right? Because if you just go out to try to learn something, then it's the motivation to actually get it out is not there. And so I think, and I kind of refer back to what I used to do in college itself. Which is every kind of break from school, I would pick like a new language and a new project, and then just spend time trying to build that in the new project. And that's how I would learn new things. And so I think that you have to kind of maintain something like that a practice like that. And then, so a follow-up to that is, in your companies, how do you help, like, is there any kind of training provided to your employees? Is there some some way that you help this process, or it's more like, so sometimes at companies, actually, it's almost like, you almost don't want people learning too much new stuff, because then they want to change everything all the time. Like, like the answer is not like the cool new thing on Hacker News is almost never the right answer when you have like a large system you're trying to maintain. And so maybe you don't want people learning new stuff all the time. I don't know. So I guess the question is, how do you manage this at your company, the training and that whole practice?
Yeah, I mean, there's always the trick of providing the time for it, right? But at Teradata, we offer quite a range. We've got the LinkedIn Learning, so there's all the stuff on there that everyone in the company has access to for specific areas. We might bring in a Go expert to teach a week-long Go training class, or we do a couple different Python classes that are on site. So it ranges all the way from, kind of online, find your own thing that you want to learn something about, to if a team is planning to maybe start a new project and they're going to do it in Go, get the whole team trained in it with an on-site instructor.
Cool. Okay, so we're almost out of time. I'd love to do a ending, just kind of closing statement from each of you, just around, like, what would be some advice you would give to somebody who's thinking about entering this space? Advice about maybe some tips from your own experience, or maybe some of the people you've hired. You've seen some things work, some things not work. Really the best advice you got for someone who's trying to break into tech. Maybe we'll start with Amy this time.
Okay. Well, I guess I would say, like, my advice would be to someone who's considering going to a boot camp. That's many of the people on this call, I'm sure. It's definitely not like a golden ticket or like a magic bullet that I think a lot of people think it is. It like is one of those things where you get out of it what you put into it. So the harder you're willing to work to make it work, the better it's going to turn out for you. And I think if you are willing to put in the work, it can definitely work. But and it can totally pay off, and you will have a new career. But I would definitely say, do your research, research the tech industry where you're thinking about, the coding bootcamp. There's a huge range of quality and things they teach and stuff like that. And then, it's a big decision, but I think it can be a good decision for the right person.
Absolutely. Thank you. Carney?
Yeah, I would say make sure you're passionate about it, right? I mean, these boot camps and tech jobs aren't easy, right? There are definitely days that you're working long hours. There are days that you're trying to solve a problem, and it's extremely difficult to solve. And working with people and building these large systems is not easy. And you'll have to research things on the side. You'll get frustrated about things that aren't working and you don't know why. You want to make sure you're in it for the right reasons. There's definitely a good salary attached to a lot of it, but I think you can ask anyone on the panel that if you were to divide it by the number of hours that you work, it may not be worth it.
Well, definitely at some stages. And sorry, Randy, I'll get to you. But sometimes I like to play a game with like the long-term programmers, like at least Carney and Randy here, about if you remember what your first job salary was, if your base salary was of your first job, And I think that like programmers today are always surprised at how low paying programming jobs used to be, right? Like today, entry level jobs are crazy high paying, but it wasn't always like that. So we don't have to play that game right now. But Randy, I'll let you finish us off with your tips.
Well, I definitely agree, and Amy and Carney said a lot of the key important things. Um, you can't force yourself into being a software developer, engineer, whatever you want to call it, writing software. Um, I think everybody should give it a try and try it more than once, because sometimes you have to push through a few tough spots. But if you can push through those and it really connects with you and you enjoy it, um, keep doing it and move further and further, because you can take it in any direction you want. You can apply it to whatever your passions and interests are. And in the future, everyone's going to need to be able to do a little bit with software. And you can take it as far as you want. You might be writing software that is just something, for a hobby and a project you're doing around the house. Or, you can write software that 1 billion people use, right? I mean, I don't know of very many industries where you can impact a significant portion of the planet the way you can in software. And so that, makes it very exciting. It also means there's a lot of responsibility. I think maybe one of the parting things I want to say is I am a little worried when I see some of the lax attention to detail in software development, because our world depends on it, and we need people writing really high quality software. And every now and then I let my Tesla drive, and then I think, wait a minute, I know some of the people at Tesla, and I put my hands back on the wheel. It's like
That's funny. You're like driving it and you're just imagining like the folks who wrote that code. So we did have one more question that I wanted to put out from Berta, is that does software engineering training or bootcamp training help when you have industry experience as a project lead or analyst and you don't have a degree? And so I guess the question is like, how much do you look at industry experience versus the educational line on somebody's resume when you're hiring a developer?
I think go ahead, Randy.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think for us, we try to look for diversity in backgrounds. So we don't necessarily look at the education. And in our job descriptions, we don't post years of experience or require a degree. We do try to test everyone with the same programming challenge and the same tests, so that is a fair playing ground. And so I think it definitely can be essential to have that industry experience, and that professionalism versus kind of getting an education.
Yeah, and I think if I look back over my many years in the field, when I started, and it was with a big company, HP, a degree was required, and really, HP was pretty selective at taking top candidates each year out of a graduating class and kind of growing them internally. But a lot has really changed since then. I see some really great candidates who have, gone through boot camp or taught themselves. Actually, I think back one engineer many years ago that worked for me. He was a chef and finally just got fed up with the restaurant business, went to a boot camp, taught himself how to become a software developer, and he was phenomenal. I mean, he was really a great guy. So my thinking on it has completely widened over the years, from thinking, okay, you've got to go through the normal path of going to a university and getting a degree. And now I know, really it's more, if you connect with writing software and enjoy it and are passionate about it, you can be a great software developer, however you learn.
Absolutely. So I think we'll leave it on that. So thank you so much to Amy, Carney, Randy, and also Alexis. And thank you all four of you for joining us, and thanks to all the attendees for all the great questions and attending this. I know it's an uncertain world out there right now, but I'm an optimist at heart, and so I do think we will get over it on the other side and come out a lot stronger. And so yeah, thank you to all of you. Stay safe, and I guess stay at home.
Yeah, stay healthy.
Stay healthy. So thank you, and good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.